Good morning. This is Larry Cedar. I'm back with you for another session on scanning, Sqanning. Scanning, excuse me while I adjust this. Scanning is a relaxation technique which utilizes the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. I try to do these sessions, public sessions daily. I also practice on my own, and I recommend you do the same. Today's going to be a kind of a quick session. We're just going to go over the fundamentals. But let's talk a little bit about the technique. Again, scanning is a relaxation technique which utilizes the incremental release of muscular tension, going from this, to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. I have determined through a lot of experimentation over the course of my life, a lot of self-help techniques and philosophies and so forth, that scanning is the most useful in terms of bringing yourself back to center, to bringing yourself to a calm, still, clear place. And so I practice it regularly, and I teach it here. So let's begin with the premise. Scanning, the incremental release of muscular tension, is based on the precepts of a man named Thaddeus Golas, spelled Golas. He wrote a book called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment, in which he talks about the two basic functions of the universe: contraction, squeeze your hands together, and expansion, release. So just see what that feels like: contraction and release, expansion. So he made the rather bold statement that everything in the universe is either in a state of contraction or expansion. And we can look at the universe that way. We can look at ourselves. We can look at everything around us, everything we experience or learn or read about or feel or do or build or destroy, as either in a state of contraction or expansion or somewhere in between. We vacillate between those two states, contraction and expansion. When you are born, it is a contraction. It is the coming together of materials and cells and substances to form a human being. When you die, you expand, and all of those materials dissipate and move out into the universe until they are reassembled again in some other form. So again, everything is contraction, expansion. And that's a really broad, bold philosophy. It covers everything in the universe. So it's pretty broad, but if you distill it down to a personal level, if you bring it down to the personal, individual level, you can begin to look at your own life and how you perceive your life and how you experience things and relate to people and how you feel at any given moment on that spectrum. Contraction, expansion. Where are you on that spectrum at any particular moment? Are you more contracted or are you more expanded? So what I discovered through my exploration was that when I was most unhappy or uncomfortable or in pain or disturbed or obsessed with worrisome thoughts is when I was contracted, when I was highly contracted. And the way of relieving those circumstances by making myself feel better was to expand, so that I became balanced. In life, we want to be able to contract and expand in a balanced way so that you are centered. We have to contract. That's how we pull things together. We make things happen. How we assume an identity. We have a career and relationships. We're pulling it together. We're keeping it together. We need that. But we also want to balance that with the opposite: expansion, letting go, clearing your mind, releasing tension, becoming permeable and accepting, open to new ideas. So we need expansion as well. Then we achieve balance. So to bring it to the conclusion of this exploration, what I found was that I could bring myself into a more expanded state through the incremental release of muscular tension. Now, expansion is something we all seek and desire. When we feel tense, when we feel bad, to put it simply, we want to release, we want to let go, we want to expand. This is why we are tempted sometimes to have a drink or smoke a joint or have sex or eat or do something that feels good. When we feel bad, we want to feel good. So we're drawn to things that make us expand. We instinctively seek that balance. So what I wanted was a technique that didn't require any external processes or forms. I didn't need to go to a masseuse. I didn't need to have a drink. I could actually expand on my own through the incremental release of muscular tension, going from this squeeze to this. Now, how does that work? Muscles are the perfect metaphor for this contraction, expansion continuum, because muscles can only do one of two things: contract, make a fist, or expand, release, let go. The muscles aren't as complicated as the mind. If you try to use a thinking process to calm yourself or make yourself feel better, you're using thoughts. You're putting together words and ideas. That's a contraction. So it's counterproductive to use a contractive process to try to expand. So we go right to the muscles. We release muscular tension. That puts us on the path towards expansion. The muscles lead the way. As you release your musculature, everything follows, including your mind, which like a muscle holds on to obsessive thoughts and ideas, which makes you confused and worried and obsessed. And as you relax the mind like a muscle, it lets go of those ideas and thoughts. They float away, and you're left in a state of clarity and calm and joy. So that's, by way of introduction, where we're headed with scanning. The incremental release of muscular tension will lead you into a more expanded state, which will make you feel better. We're talking about trying to feel better when you feel bad. That's all it is. And you know when you feel bad, and you know when you feel better. So here we go. We start with what I call the preliminary steps of scanning. Preliminary steps of scanning. We already indicated through this squeeze and release what it feels like to release, to expand. But now we're going to do some preliminary steps which will jumpstart this expansive process. We start with three things. Breaths, deep breaths, which are expansive by nature. When you're contracted, you tend to hold your breath and not breathe enough. So we want to reverse that by taking deep breaths. Then we want to sit in absolute stillness and silence for anywhere from 15 seconds to a minute. Stillness, when I say stillness, I mean absolute stillness, is the opposite of activity or action. When you're contracted, you're trying to accomplish something. We tend to be doing, we tend to be active. So when you become perfectly still, you stop the contractive process. And then, of course, silence, because words and thoughts are contractions. So these three preliminary steps, breath, stillness, and silence, will jumpstart this expansive process. And we build. We start with 3 breaths, followed by 15 seconds of stillness and silence. So take as deep a breath as you can. And then when I say sit in absolute stillness and silence, I mean don't move a muscle. It's something we rarely do. And you'll see how that changes your state of being. 3 deep breaths, followed by 15 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. Here we go. 15 seconds absolute stillness and silence. Don't move a muscle. Deep breath. And note what changes you feel in your body from those 3 simple steps. Deep breaths, stillness, and silence. See if you can begin to feel that shift, that slight shift. Now, contraction takes many forms. Contraction can be tense, a sort of tense feeling. Contraction can be depressed, because that's an emotional contraction. Contraction can be lethargic or tired. So as you begin to shift away from that, see if you feel a little bit more energized. See if you feel a little lighter. If you feel a little more still and calm. And we're just getting started. It's a progressive, cumulative process. So now we're going to move to 5 deep breaths, followed by 30 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. And again, these are the preliminary steps of scanning. We're going to move into the actual incremental muscular release next. But first we do, these preliminaries. 5 deep breaths, 30 seconds, absolute stillness and silence, but continuing to breathe. Here we go. Last one, very deep. 30 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. Deep breath. Now, I always start these sessions by talking quite a bit. And so it's always interesting to me as I begin to take more extensive periods of stillness and silence, how nice it feels to stop talking. Because you're moving again out of a contractive state into an expanded state, which is in the now, in the present. It's very still. It's very peaceful. It's very pleasant. So see if you start to feel those feelings as you move further and further into an expanded state. Again, we're nudging ourselves out of a contracted state into a more expanded state. You can't contract and expand at the same time. You can't make a fist and release a fist at the same time. So every movement towards expansion is taking you away from contraction. So let that happen. Let that happen. Last step, 7 deep breaths, followed by a full minute, 60 seconds, excuse me, of absolute stillness and silence. 7 deep breaths. And begin to note the changes you feel in your body and your consciousness as we push ourselves further down that path. 7 deep breaths. Last one. 60 seconds, absolute stillness and silence, but continue to breathe. Thirty more seconds. Deep breath. So I say jumpstart because when we are in a contracted state, we tend to be holding rather tightly to that contracted state. Contraction wants to hold. It doesn't want to let go. So deep breaths are a way of sort of forcibly moving yourself into an expanded state. As I said, breaths are expansive by nature. You're reversing the holding process and you're opening up. So it can be a little jarring. It can make you a little dizzy. You can feel a little disoriented. You're literally changing states of consciousness. That's why I say pay close attention to how you feel. If you feel a little dizzy, that's okay. But what happens for me, which I always really enjoy, is that I forget why I'm here. I come to these sessions with intent. That's a contraction. I've decided, I've made a decision to proceed in a certain way, to follow certain steps. It's something I put together. But as I begin to expand, I stop paying as close attention to that intent. And I start just sitting in the moment. And I literally would sometimes forget why I'm here, which I take as a very good sign that I've begun to expand. If you've ever sort of drifted off and forgotten your train of thought or forgotten what you were doing when you got up and went into the room, you're sort of expanding. You're vacillating between a contractive and expansive state. And so you have to kind of pull it together. You know, someone would say, get it together, get your shit together. What they're saying is contract, because we need contraction. We have to take these steps in life to complete the tasks at hand, to fulfill our obligations, to maintain our relationships. You can't just be drifting. So we, again, want to go between contraction and expansion. We want to balance. We scan when we're overly contracted and we need to expand. So that's the preliminary phase. Deep breaths, stillness, and silence. Now we move into what I call the nuts and bolts of the technique. Excuse me. And I do move through these steps fairly quickly because I'm just trying to review the steps. But when you're doing these sessions, please take as much time as you like. Time is a construct, is a contraction. So, you know, I'm paying attention to the clock. I'm saying I want to do this in 30 minutes. But when you're expanded, time doesn't mean as much to you. You stop paying attention to time. You forget what time it is. You forget what day it is. You forget what year it is, how old you are. You forget your name. You've expanded. It doesn't matter. You just exist. So when you're practicing on your own, take your time. Take time. Let go of time and be in the moment. So let's move through these expansive muscular release steps. Again, scanning is the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. We're going from this squeeze to this. 3, 2, 1, release. Squeeze your hands together. Squeeze, tight, tight, tight. 3, 2, 1, release. We want to, excuse me, we want to do that throughout our entire body. Sqanning, spelled with a Q, is just a sort of a twist on the word scanning, spelled with a C. I use the Q to distinguish it as a technique. But what we're doing is scanning our body, looking for pockets of muscular tension and releasing that tension incrementally, cumulatively. We start with individual zones and move through the entire body. Zone 1 is the face. On my count, release the tension in your face. 3, 2, 1, and release. I would start with the face. It's easy. Look in the mirror. You can see the change. You can see that release, that incremental release of tension. That feeling, that is scanning. And you're going to move through your body and induce that state of relaxation and release incrementally until you feel it starts to take over your entire body, and you will completely let go of all the tension, all the contractions you've developed and built over the course of your morning or day or year or month or year to hold it together, to keep it together. That will all release, and you'll find yourself in this completely open, released, relaxed, calm, still, empty, accepting, permeative state. The face, 3, 2, 1, and release. Again, the face, 3, 2, 1, and release. That's the feeling. That is scanning. That's it. It's very simple. Very simple to learn, very simple to practice. And the challenge with scanning is getting yourself to do it regularly, to infuse your life with equal amounts of expansion as there are contractions. That way you have a balanced life. I find it very difficult to get myself to practice even after all these years because I don't want to let go. My contractions don't want to stop contracting. So if you feel resistance, that's natural, and it's a good sign that you have mind for contractions and you have found them, and now you're going to release them. Zone 2 is the top of the head. 3, 2, 1, and release. Feel that sort of release of the brow, sort of slackening. Zone 3 is the back of the head. 3, 2, 1, and release. And don't think about it, just do it. Just let go. The back of the head. 3, 2, 1, and release. And if you say, I don't know what that feels like. I've never released the tension at the back of my head or the top of my head, or how do you do that? I don't know what that feels like. Well, squeeze your hands together. 3, 2, 1, and release. That's it. But you're learning how to do it in parts of your body you weren't aware you had control over. So initially, it might seem strange, but you'll, with practice, get better and better at it. Zone 4 is the neck. 3, 2, 1, and release. It's just letting go. It's the simplest and yet sometimes the most challenging thing in life, just to let go. Let go. It's why we go to masseuses. It's why we use what I call chemical expansion techniques, such as alcohol and, drugs, because we don't feel we can do it on our own, because we're afraid to let go. So we use something else. We say, you do it. I can't do it. You do it here. Great. So it works. And I can't fault anyone for wanting to make that happen. Whatever works for you. But there's a natural, healthy alternative for which you have total control, and that's scanning. You can induce this relaxed state yourself, and it's convenient. So if you're on your own somewhere, and you don't have to have that feeling of, I need this, I need that to relax, I need to take a vacation, I need to take a shot, I need to smoke a joint, I have to do this or that because I got to relax, you'll suddenly go, oh, I can induce this state on my own through muscular release. But you have to practice. You get better and better at it. Zone 4, the neck. 3, 2, 1, and release. And I use the snap just as a kind of a way to flip a switch. If your muscle is contracted, let's say you're exerting energy, the power is on, and you flip the switch off like that. That's it. That's all you're doing. So it's a kind of a way of sending a signal to yourself. Release. But use whatever works for you. You don't have to snap. You can do whatever you want. Zone 5, the shoulders. Let them drop. 3, 2, 1, and release. Again, the shoulders. 3, 2, 1, and release. And you will feel resistance. Just keep moving through it. What's important is that you recognize that even the smallest amount of release has value. So even if you feel the slightest release, the shoulders, 3, 2, 1, and you did it. Because it's, again, cumulative. So you want to continue to just add little bits of expansion, little bits of muscular release, and it will eventually become a bigger and bigger sort of tumbleweed of releasing. Everything will let go. Zone 6, excuse me, is the chest, stomach, in front of the waist, what I call the plate of armor, our protective plate of armor. 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, chest, stomach, front of the waist. 3, 2, 1, and release. Take a deep breath. You may, as you begin to release muscular tension, feel an impulse to take a deep breath. That's natural, and that's right, and that's good, and do it. When you're contracted, you tend to hold your breath. You're preparing for battle. You're preparing for life. We forget to breathe. So as you begin to release muscular tension, and you're sending this signal to yourself that it's okay to let go, your body, which has been depleted of oxygen because you've been holding your breath, will say, please, yes. And it'll say, breathe. And it'll go, it will ask you to breathe. So follow the lead of your body. Zone 7 is down the back, past the waist and into the pelvis. 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, the pelvis. 3, 2, 1, and release. We hold a lot of tension in the pelvic region. It's the area of both sexuality and waste elimination, so it's very sensitive. We're constantly concerned about losing control in that area, embarrassing ourselves, revealing ourselves. So it is a lot of clenching and holding that goes on there. So tune into that area. Excuse me. Early morning. Tune into that area and just see if you can release the slightest amount of clenching, of tension from this to this. The pelvis. 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, 3, 2, 1, and release. So let's review. Zone 1, the face. 3, 2, 1, release. The top of the head. 3, 2, 1, release. The back of the head. 3, 2, 1. The neck. 3, 2, 1. The shoulders. 3, 2, 1. Chest, stomach, front of the waist. 3, 2, 1. Back down into the pelvis. 3, 2, 1. And finally, zone 8, down the legs, across the knees, and into the feet. The feet are very important. Very sensitive, but at the same time very strong. Think about it. If you touch the bottom of your foot, you jump. Very sensitive. But at the same time, maybe one of the strongest parts of our body. It carries our weight, 100 pounds, 300 pounds, whatever you are, and transports you around the world. So what amazing parts of our body. And you do yourself a great favor if you let go of tension in your feet, because there's a lot of nerve endings in your feet that are connected to the organs of every part of your body. So a relaxed foot leads to a healthy body. And this is why foot massages feel so good. So if you can learn to release tension in your feet, even the slightest amount, to feel the blood rushing back into the soles of your feet and throbbing as they come back to life and relax and become more vibrant and full of oxygen, you'll have done yourself a great favor. So think about your feet. 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, 3, 2, 1, the feet, and release. 3, 2, 1, the feet, and release. Deep breath. Now what we're doing is we're paying attention to our body in ways we don't usually do. We go through life just kind of living our life. And we rarely take the time to say to our body, how you doing? How you doing? Can I do anything to help? We tend to just feel the way we feel. We tend to be put upon by life, and we think this is happening, so it's making me feel this way. There's nothing I can do about it, except, as I said, take a drink or smoke a joint. We don't recognize the ability, innate ability we have, amazing ability we have to help ourselves. All we need to do is stop and pay attention to what's going on. Take a moment and say, what's going on? Where am I at? What can I do to help myself? In a way, it's taking responsibility for your own state of being. You know, we don't want to take responsibility for how we feel. It's so complicated. It's so difficult. It's scary. Excuse me. Sorry. And it can be scary to let go. We don't want to actually face, confront, and look at what we're going through. But through practice of scanning, you can learn to monitor yourself and to help yourself and to guide yourself into a more expanded, healthful state. But first you have to be willing to look at where you're at. And as I said, that can be uncomfortable and scary. But if you learn to do it, take those moments to tune in. How am I feeling? How contracted am I? Can I let go of some of that? Letting go is scary, but I can do it. I'll do it incrementally in small amounts. I'll take the time to be with myself, to heal myself. And I'll face myself, whatever that might be. That might be frightening, but I'm going to take a look at where I'm at. I'm going to tune in and maybe touch those areas that are anxious or contracted and see what I can do about nudging them into a more open, relaxed state. But you have to decide to do it. Sqanning, the incremental release of muscular tension, is a very simple tool for bringing yourself into a more expanded state. And that's it for today. A little shortened session. I just like to touch on the basic premises. I'll repost this session on my Facebook page and then move it over also to the Sqanning Facebook page where there's a lot more sessions. Sqanning. And take a look if you want. All the sessions are basically the same. I just come here in case anyone has a question or maybe to cover the whatever's going on for that day. Yesterday I hadn't gotten much sleep and I wanted to see how Sqanning helped me. Today it's very early, so I want to see how will Sqanning help me get started with my day. You know, a relaxed beginning to a day can make the entire day better. I have noticed that when I scan and then I go to exercise, the workout is much easier because my muscles are more relaxed and more available to do the work. I'm not at war with myself. So try it. See what Sqanning does for you, mentally, physically, and emotionally. I end every session with rule number 1, and that is love yourself. Thaddeus Gola says love is the most expansive act you can take in the universe. Everything begins and ends there. And this is what you were given. You're only going to get this once until it dissipates at the end of your life and turns into something else. So love it. You might as well. This is you. This is what you were given. When you love yourself, you accept yourself, you embrace yourself, you become permeable and open. And when you are open and loving of yourself, you can be more open and loving of others, which makes for a much more pleasant, enjoyable life. When you are contracted, we tend to slam up against life and others. When we are expanded and permeable, we can more easily merge with others and circumstances of our life. We can manage our life more pleasurably. We can feel better when we have been feeling bad. And that's what we want, is to feel better. Why not? Why not? So that's it. Have yourself a great day and a great weekend, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.